Okay, hello and welcome to MSDynamicsWorld.com's Fall BI webcast series. I'm Jason Gumpert, and joining us today for this event is Cristian Nicola of DynamicsBIGuide.com. Cristi is a Dynamics ERP veteran, and he works with many Dynamics customers on selecting and implementing the right BI solution, anything from an Excel-based solution up through a wider array of specialized packages. Cristi is also a frequent presenter on the topic of BI for Dynamics, and we are really glad to have him with us today. So as we get started, I just want to add, we invite you to add your feedback and ask questions during the presentation, and there are a couple ways for you to do this. First, you can use the Q&A or chat blocks that you'll see to the right of the screen. You can use those during the session or anytime after. We'll also be tweeting during the session with the hashtag MSDWBI to share what we're learning and also try to hear from you with your questions or comments. So without further delay, please allow me to welcome Cristian Nicola. And
hello.
Cristi, are you there?
Hi. Yes, hi. Can you hear me? We
can.
Okay. Hi, everyone. As I was introduced, my name is Cristian Nicola, and we will be talking about looking at BI solutions for the Dynamics ERP products and some of the things that we should consider through that process. As we go through this product, my background is mainly on the Dynamics and AV part, but everything that we'll be talking is applicable to any of the Dynamics ERP products, so it's purely targeted towards BI and the various options that are available. We will start, we'll start our presentation with discussing first try to introduce the concept of why should you even consider BI in the first place, and then once we cover the topic, we will move on to sort of what is a BI solution made up of in terms of its components, and therefore what you should consider in trying to evaluate one. So without further ado, I guess we will start with our presentation. Obviously, everybody's familiar with the Dynamics ERP product, everybody's familiar with reporting. It is the first thing that we use to get information out of our system. So that's obviously one option versus business intelligence, and that's normally where every customer starts with. So we wanted to sort of put into perspective what we feel that the place of reporting is, and therefore, by comparison, where BI would actually fall into it. So if we take a look at reporting. So there are some pros when we consider reporting, and then there are some cons. Pros, when you use a reporting tool, generally, then you get a direct access to that database. That means basically you have access to any table and any field within that database, and also any reports that you're running will actually provide you live instant access to the latest information present in your database. So basically, if you're running, say, an open order report, you will be getting the latest orders in your system. If you're running a invoicing report, you'll be getting the invoices as of that moment in your system. Usually reporting, as I mentioned before, is something that comes, there is an option, the default option that comes with your ERP system, basically the standard, either the reporting tool within the product or some of the SQL reporting services or everything like that. These are some of the pros. Also, in terms of cons, when we consider reporting, basically one of the cons is direct access to the database. So why is that both a pro and a con? Pro because it gives you sort of flexibility if you have the knowledge for it, but also basically as the amount of information that you're reporting on grows, the performance of those reports goes down. Usually ERP systems are more optimized for reporting and not for writing, not for reading. Generally, when you're trying to do reporting, the design of the reports usually requires technical knowledge. Basically, requires you both, since you're accessing directly the database, it requires you to understand a little bit about, or quite a lot about, the structure of the underlying tables and fields or underlying structure of the application. Also, depending on the tool set that you're using, let's say if you were to use SSRS or even one of the reporting tools embedded within the actual ERP, you would need to know some coding for that, whether it's NAV coding or whether it's AX coding. So that definitely, usually people that design those reports are actually technical people. No one version of the truth. So since with reports, you're basically building reports, and you're starting with reports. Generally, you start from scratch. Even if you are copying something from a previous report you've done, normally the concept is you have to start bringing together the table or tables that you're trying to build as part of your reporting, and then define what is the information from there that you're trying to put together. The problem with that is basically you could end up having two different people trying to build reports that are supposed to show the same kind of information. However, by them not selecting the right filters or selecting the right data tables or the right fields, you could end up with different results. I think one example that I gave in the realm of Dynamics NAV is that basically, for instance, to be able to get the sales amount, you should be going to the table value entry. You should know that you're filtering on an entry type sale. You should be looking for the sales amount actual, not sales amount expected, and you should be filtering on source type customer, and you should know that source number field represents the actual customer number in that particular context. Obviously not something terribly complicated, but something that, obviously takes some time of understanding the underlying tables within the Dynamics NAV structure. And then more important, basically anybody and two different people that are trying to build a report for that sales amount will have to basically make sure that they use that exact same set of information to end up with the same result. Also, the other thing with reporting usually is just a single source reporting. So basically reports usually are built against your ERP or against, your AX data or your Access database. But usually it's pretty much one single point of contact in terms of where the data is being taken from. So this was just a sort of a quick overview in terms of what we should consider in terms of reporting. So in terms of reporting tools, with the Dynamics NAV, we have the Navision reporting tools. We also have SQL reporting services, there's Management Reporter, and then within the Navision space, we have G-Reports or Express or Essentials. This is some of the options. However, if we basically at this point, now that we framed the reporting concept, we can move on to basically the BI concepts. As I mentioned before, normally ERP databases are optimized because obviously it's a system that is meant to record your data and help you with processing. They are optimized for writing data, not for reading data. And generally within a relational database, you will always have a trade-off between optimizing for writing or optimizing for reading. Obviously, reading requires supporting structures like keys and flow fields in the Navision space, whereas writing requires the least amount of supporting structures. It makes it faster and reduces the amount of deadlock and everything else. So BI attempts to solve that by basically creating two different sets that you will use for one. You will keep your ERP system just for writing, and then basically you will create a different set of data structures just for reporting. This way, each of them can be optimized for its intended use. So this is sort of a stylized philosophical concept of what how does BI what is the BI process. So the starting point for us basically is the raw data. This is our dynamic system. You can have a lot of tables. You can have a lot of fields. The relationships between them lead to a complex data model that is pretty hard to visualize and definitely quite hard to work with. So the first step is basically to go and create a separate SQL database, data warehouse, or this can be, as we will see later on, can be created just in memory, but create a separate structure that basically just what it does, it takes from the entire raw data simply the relevant data. So basically we will take only the tables and the fields that are actually relevant in terms of reporting. There are obviously in each ERP system, there are a lot of tables that are supporting for processing that really have absolutely no bearing in terms of the reporting end result. We try to do a simple organizing of those things by subject within that data warehouse, and also we try to clean it up and sort of make it consistent across the various subjects that we work with. And then as a finite result, we basically create cubes using OLAP technology from Microsoft. And in cubes, basically what we do is we create dimensions and measures. And basically those will be the only two elements that we will be handling within the BI framework. The cubes are basically optimized for speed and are simply meant to be something that you read often and you write very rarely to them. The dimensions that represent the categories that you would be analyzing your data by. So, dimensions would be customers, salespeople, geography, item numbers, and date, basically. Whereas basically measures will be what would you want to measure within. So how would you want to put together what you're analyzing? So basically that would be your sales amount, your cost amount, your GL balances, GL budget, quantity of items sold, number of contacts made to a particular prospect or a particular customer, and so on. So basically, we sort of go from a lot of data and a very complex data model to hopefully a very technical scenario through this sort of scrubbing process, which is called the ETL, a process called ETL, extraction, transformation, and loading. We get to a hopefully simplified model that will use only a business language that will be relevant to users. One of the things that I wanted to highlight in terms of the advantages of using a data warehouse, basically, as I mentioned, the process of getting the data out of the sources and putting it into the data warehouse is called ETL, extraction, transformation, and loading. The other advantage of having a data warehouse and therefore a different structure from your ERP system is that versus the reporting, it allows you to have multiple data sources. So in this screenshot, you can see that the ERP system is one of the things that is being brought into the data warehouse for the purposes of all app analysis, reporting, or data mining afterwards. But you can definitely bring other things in. So for instance, you can bring the CRM data. If you had an access database with some other sort of offline, if you will, information that you haven't brought into your ERP, that can be brought over as well. Any kind of flat files, any kind of other information sitting around that you normally sort of cut and paste into Excel spreadsheets to finalize your reports and get everything you need in there, they can all be brought together within the data warehouse, and therefore having one single place from an end user perspective when they do any kind of analysis. For them, the reporting concept will be transparent versus having to say, okay, we'll run a report against this, we'll run a report against this, and against this, and then put the results together to get a final result. So this is one other advantage of the BI approach if we do create a data warehouse. So I guess to sort of summarize the BI concepts, business intelligence, it's a translation from technical to business language. So what does that mean? If we were using reporting or if we were using the ERP as our sort of basis for building any kind of analysis, we would have to talk most of the time in terms of tables and fields. Hopefully, if the BI solution is done the proper way, we only have two elements, dimensions and measures, and the dimensions and measures that we'll see further down in some examples should be framework in the business language that should be relevant to users. Business intelligence is a decision-making tool, so the goal of this being, turning data into information that can be used for intelligence. So basically, you should be able to use this tool for the ability of quickly answering, what are my top 5 customers, what I'm most performing or least performing, what are my top salespeople, and so on. The goal of BI, basically, used the proper way, is to start at a high-level set of information. Basically try to figure out trends, summaries, metrics, and then basically try to use that high-level information to reveal decision points quickly and figure out what your next best action is. So to start with, because basically the normal standard of reporting within a Dynamics ERP system tends to create long documents with a lot of data in them, whereas basically here you would want to start with a high level, and then based on the trends or based on specific points of information that are outside of the norm, you would try to sort of drill down into them and try to find the details. So this way you can sort of make an action plan. One other thing that basically we will this circles back to our discussion about reporting. So one version of the truth. As I said, the business intelligence will make a transition from a technical language to a business language. So basically, that gives us a sort of a new language to use, which is dimensions and measures. I sort of compare the dimensions and measures, if you will, that are provided with cubes as the Lego pieces within a Lego system. So basically, those are the building blocks that then you can use to build whatever your users are looking for without necessarily having to interact with them. But the good point is that each building block basically has its own definition, that it will be consistent regardless of the number of users that use them and regardless of what they use them for. So basically, to use a specific example, if you're defining your cost, let's say, to be whatever the direct cost of the product is plus, say, 10%. If you're doing reports, you would actually have to basically in each report make sure to add that 10%. And then if at some point that changes or you want to make it more nuanced to say it's being driven by the vendor you're getting your product from, which location is being stored into, and many other factors that can go into that decision, all of a sudden you'll have to go and redefine all those reports, and basically you'll never know that it's basically the same result across all of them. Whereas basically if we are building our Lego building blocks with a BI solution, the cost definition is what they use to build the reports. Whatever they use it for, to define profit, to define any kind of metrics that are relevant to them. Behind the scenes, it's a black box approach. So basically, if we go in and adjust on the back end of the BI, we change the definition to be instead of 10% something else with a new formula, that will instantly be updated across all the reports that are using that building block without the user having to do anything. And also this obviously would still be a transparent process to them. Okay. So basically, this is kind of a overview of sort of BI concepts versus reporting to frame it against reporting. So, I know I concentrate a little bit about on the BI more than on the reporting, but basically what I wanted to say is reporting versus BI. I mean, both reporting and BI should be used in an organization to obtain a complete picture of your business. Obviously, before BI has become a more used concept within the dynamic system, everybody was using just reporting, and obviously a lot of the information that you're looking for can be provided, maybe not in an efficient manner, but in one or another, to a certain extent, can be provided with just reporting. And also BI should not be, and the BI can obviously take over a lot of those tasks and provide a much better framework for it. However, BI is not meant to be a replacement for reporting. So as I mentioned before, when I was talking about the philosophical points about BI, is that BI is not meant to generate long strings of data. So let's say if you're trying to build a daily invoicing report, or a customer listing, basically those are things that are probably still better suited for a reporting concept, simply because you're just trying to provide a static list of information. While some of it can be provided through BI, it's probably not the best use. Also, as we will cover later on the process, remember there's a delay because we're moving the data from the ERP into a separate data structure. Because it's not 100% live most of the time, this is not meant to be, for instance, for BI, you shouldn't be using it for an open order report. Basically an open order report, the information changes, hourly by the minute with the new system. And it's basically sort of transitory information anyway. So, from a BI perspective, since you're usually trying to do analytical stuff or analytical information and look over and try to find out trends and everything else, obviously an open order report would not be something that would be best suited for BI. So obviously keeping in mind what we covered, I think I always recommend to my customers to basically just consider both options and basically figure out which fits where in terms of the needs for information. All right, so this was basically the philosophical concept of why you should consider BI and what are the problems that it's attempting to solve. The next thing we will concentrate on what is the structure of a BI solution, and basically that should give you a little bit of information in terms of the elements that you should consider and the things that you should look at when making a decision, and actually even more important when implementing it. So in terms of the Microsoft Corporate BI structure, we have our ERP system, and then we have our BI solution. So the BI solution is basically formed, not necessarily officially, but these are the two components that you should think about. There's a BI backend and the BI front end. As you can see here, the ERP system is Microsoft Dynamics, AX and AV, GP. You can have one or more companies, one or more databases, different versions, and so on. Then the back end is the part that creates, whether in memory or through those data warehouse and cube structures that we mentioned, they create a data warehouse and OLAP cube. So this is basically the behind-the-scenes back end, obviously, of the solution. And the front end is the viewer for those structures, is the way you interact with them. So I guess the way you can think about this in terms of a Dynamics product is basically the back end is all the code, everything behind the scenes, all the logic, business logic, and everything else. Front end is basically, let's say, the role-teller client is one way you can interact. Or, basically there's the web client, SharePoint client, and so on. So there are various ways with interacting with that business logic, or in our case with the BI back end, each of them with its own pros and cons. So if we are breaking this out, then basically we should consider, when you consider, you should realize that there's two parts to it, and basically you should consider there's different elements to consider when you choose this versus this. So how to build a BI solution? So BI solution is, as I just showed on the other slide, there's two parts to it. There's the BI backend, which I always call the engine of the car. So basically this is what makes the car run. So, obviously without a good backend, basically it doesn't matter how nice and good looking it is if we don't have a good solid foundation. Then the BI front end is really the shiny red convertible. That is basically what normal end users get to see, which is basically the end result with the visualization tool put on top of it. So basically, usually that's what they sort of consider in terms of the end result. In terms of choosing a backend, basically one thing, at least in my opinion, is something that should be considered. There is no one-size-fits-all. There is no one single product out there that is going to be the right solution for everybody. Basically, depending on your needs, your budget, your internal technical knowledge, there are different solutions that make sense for different customers. In terms of selecting a backend, I always say that to a certain extent the selection process is similar to selecting your ERP in the first place. I mean, basically all the backend solutions basically will provide you with the starting point, which is based usually on the standard Dynamics ERP product out of the box. So through your ERP process, you basically looked at a standard product, and then after that you do a gap analysis. Basically, what is there, and how much more do I need to put in to basically make it fit my own business needs. Same thing with BI. I mean, the BI will give different BI solutions will give you different starting points. Different backend solutions will give you different starting points. To which basically at that point you have to figure out, how much more do you need to add to it to make it fit your needs. So under that concept, basically, I think to me the number one thing that people should consider when they're looking at the backend part of the solution, the depth and the breadth of the cubes delivered. Basically, the cubes normally with solutions cover different functional areas within that match usually the same functional areas on the ERP side. Sales, receivables, GL, inventory, and AR, AP, and so on. So from that perspective, basically you wanna make sure if you're using manufacturing, in my mind, you need to make sure that basically you have something that actually already covers manufacturing, even if it's out of the box and you might need to modify it afterwards. That definitely gives you a leg up. The same way as you could easily buy NAV out of the box or AX out of the box and then modify to basically make your needs. There's a lot of add-ons out there in the ERP space that basically will do a lot of the things that you require without you having to do it customization just for yourself. So the smaller that gap is when you start, the better and the more likely that you will have a successful implementation. And after that, basically, I think the second thing, obviously, that people have to consider is the cost, obviously. Comparing once you sort of narrow down the solutions, look at a cost of it, which is an obvious point. And then last thing, I guess depending on whether the back end, the development, you will consider taking it in-house or not, at that point you can also consider how to customize that solution. Basically, some solutions use the Microsoft BI stack, and at that point, basically, if you have internal SQL knowledge, either just general SQL or even SQL plus integration services, analysis services, and all those tools that come along with the SQL package, it may make more sense to stick with something that follows the standard. If you don't necessarily have that knowledge, or basically, let's say you would rather use something less technical, there are third-party tools that make the process of building the back end easier for non-technical people, and that could be a consideration if you're choosing to take this in-house. In terms of the front end, basically, I think here there's a large availability of options. Basically, what I normally mention is basically the Microsoft tools, since that's the stack. That doesn't mean that basically they're the best tools out there or anything, but basically this is kind of what we can reliably mention from the Microsoft side. In terms of using as a front end to connect to the cubes, you can use Excel 2010 or 2013. You can use SharePoint 2010. I'm not really sure if there's a new version coming out right now. These two connect to a cube, and I'll make a quick demo in a second. They interact with the cube through a pivot table interface. In 2013, there's also another sort of component called Power View, which allows for building more visually pleasing presentations on top of the cubes. And then basically in terms of third-party tools that basically allow you to take the visualization concept to its fullest potential, as well as take it to mobile and everything else. And we'll cover a little bit what's the comparison between Excel and third party. the list of products here is endless. And I mean, here, I mean, honestly, whenever I work with my own customers, I basically recommend that that's simply a matter of preference. Whereas sometimes on the back end, I may have a recommendation or two to make to my customers. Here, it's simply a matter of every customer what they prefer. I mean, basically, because the visualization tool, some visualization, how easy it is to design the reports and everything else, that is such a subjective concept. Okay, so this is kind of the, I think, the two, the two categories and some of the ideas that you should consider. And I guess basically, as I mentioned before, what I'll do is I'll show a couple of things that are available within the Microsoft space, and then after that I'll come back and sort of talk a little bit on the visualization side, what third parties have to offer. So the next thing is look at the Excel BI features and how far they can get you. Usually the reason we start with that is just simply, I guess, I always say that Excel is free for you as a customer. I mean, normally that's not, I mean, it's not necessarily free, but you've already purchased it the same way as the SQL tools. So the first thing that we're going to cover, basically, it's self-service BI. This is sort of probably something that it's a good way to get started for, basically if you want to do something on your own or at least to understand the process of building a data warehouse. So self-service BI, what that means, it's basically usually this ends up being a, something that Microsoft started offering with Power Pivot as well as OData. I think it works very well, in my opinion, with OData web services, and they are available in NAV and AX. I know actually OData web services are available in CRM as well, and I'm pretty sure they probably will add it to CRM if they haven't already. So the Power Pivot is a free add-on that in 2010 basically doesn't come with Excel 2010, but you can just download it from Microsoft website and just install it along with 2010. In Excel 2013 is already embedded in the product as you install it. And for Power Pivot, basically this is in-memory BI. So that means all that process of data warehousing, cubing, and making things faster and optimized for reading, it's all done in memory instead of being done into a separate data structure. And for that, I will basically switch to my computer. Hopefully everything is going to go properly. Okay, I hope everybody can see my screen right now. So basically the two things that I wanted to sort of illustrate, first just a simple, first the OData concept. I will be using NAV, but we can definitely sort of, it would be the same concept on the AX side as well. So in 2013 NAV, there's an object called query, where basically what you can do, you can publish to outside world through either web services or through this OData web services, which is what we will be using. Pretty much a sort of query-like concept from your Navision database. So what I've set up to illustrate the concept of Power Pivot, I set up a list of the salespeople. So basically, I have the salespeople in my database, their code and the name and a commission percentage. I've also set up a list of customer information. So I've taken only three different, from the customer table, I've taken three different things. Taken the customer number, customer name, and its state, as you can see here. And then the last thing I have I have another published query, which is basically the sales details, which already has some of this information, but I'll illustrate how it can be used without necessarily having all these connections. So basically here it's sort of an inner join between salesperson, customer, and the sales invoice details. So whenever you actually publish these things whenever you publish the queries to the outside world, they become available basically via sort of web service interface. So to connect to Power Pivot, basically, as I said, it's something that you download from the Microsoft website. I think it's actually, if you go powerpivot.org, now it used to be a standalone website. Now I think it directs you back to Microsoft. So you can just go there and download it. So you have Power Pivot. In Excel 2010, when you click this, it opens up a different screen. It's sort of a slightly different thing from Excel, but it's connected to it. So what you can say here, one of the options is from data feeds. So this is basically the address that gets published, as you can see, from NAV, and this is my salespeople. So I can go in here and say I want to bring in my salespeople, and these are my three salespeople in the database. So let's say we're going to rename this tab to be salespeople. Okay. Then what we will do is we'll bring over the customers. the customer information, as you can see, gets published as sort of an XML file that you can access over the web. And that's actually another strength, I think, in my mind for data. It's not simply something that you can use just for this, but you can actually use it for accessing data outside of your database system, but actually still have control over it in terms of what actually gets published to the outside world. So here, this is the list of customers within my database. So these are the standard demo customers with my states and everything else. We'll call this customers or something close to that. And then the last basic address is this one for the sales information. So if we do this, basically we can add sales information as well, and we get it inside Excel, Power Pivot. So this is my sales information, which, as you can see, already has all these other parts. But I mean, basically, really the relevant part is here. I have my document number, line number, the item number, how much quantity I sold, what was the total dollars, and the posting date. So basically, what you can do within Power Pivot is you can actually define relationships between. So let's see if we define this as sales. You can define relationships, which is at the very lowest level a similar process to building the data warehouse and the cubes in a full-blown BI. So I can say that basically within my salesperson code is really linked to the salesperson and the code from that table. So that's a connection that I'm going to make. I can create another relationship, which basically says my customer number from here is linked to the customer over here, and that's another relationship I want to make. So that's a definition. Further, you can add columns with calculations, and I mean there's a lot of calculations that you can do, and there's actually an entire set of language functions called DAX that basically allows you to do some really powerful stuff with the information that you already have. But I mean, that's not the scope of this demo presentation. Once you have the data put together, the way you interact with it is basically by going back with a pivot table that throws you back into Excel. So at this point, basically, as you can see here, we have all the three tabs. This is sort of the pivot table concept. You have all the three tabs over here. So obviously, in theory, you could have just brought over the sales information. So I could have easily built my sales quantity and amount here by just my salespeople, right? But I mean, what I wanted to illustrate a point is by doing the linking between this and the other reference, first of all, I can actually use the salesperson from this other thing, so I don't necessarily have to have these other three fields in here. That's one thing. So now all of a sudden I can do this, but also all of a sudden you've built in some other references. So for instance, I can sort of look at my reporting by the commission percent, or for the customer, for instance, I can build my reporting by state without necessarily having the state in this particular feed. So at this point, I can look at my sales by state. So by adding all these links together, it's actually a pretty good way to build a more advanced concept than just simply connecting to one single table. Also, in terms of keeping in mind potential to this, as I mentioned to you, basically CRM, you can publish the data from CRM as an OData feed as well. So I mean, one way I can see this besides within each ERP itself, NAV-AX, I can also see something where you could bring some of the data from NAV and then some of the data from CRM